I knew we had video. I probably would have done my hair or
Oh, please.
something.
You can just settle down.
Yeah.
I had taken a shower one night and Jason Bretzman was on. He goes, "Oh, Mandy, you look so tired." I'm like, "Nope, I'm just a girl. We don't wear makeup at night. So sit down."
Welcome to the Stories in EDU podcast, the show where we talk with real educators and hear their powerful impact. Their stories will grab you, inspire you, and show you the reach of the work we do. And now, the Bretzman Group presents your hosts, Josh Gauthier and Mandy Taylor.
All right. Well, on that note, welcome back to the Stories in EDU podcast. And this is the podcast where you can hear great stories told by educators from around the world. And hopefully you'll be inspired. Maybe you'll laugh a little bit, learn a thing or two tonight. But thank you for joining us once again. Mandy, I got in trouble for tweeting this week.
Uh-oh.
I did. And I feel kind of bad about it. It came out of frustration. But I think it was interesting to me that I probably tweeted similar things. It was about homework. But I've talked about the girl that I've give a ride to school, and she had a really rough night with homework. So I kind of tweeted something out of frustration. And yeah, I got one of the teachers, that's her teacher, came and talked to me about it because he saw the tweet. And it made me really think about, man, I guess I didn't think anything of it because I say stuff all the time about my feelings about education on Twitter. But two, man, these are conversations that are hard to have about those things because people take it so personally.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think that one of my biggest perceptions, I suppose, I was in the classroom for 17 years, and then moving into that instructional coaching position, one of the things I realized, or I guess it was confirmed for me, is just how fiercely personal education is to educators. Because anytime somebody would say something, whether a new book came out or where there's a new initiative or whatever, it's not just saying, "Hey, you now need to do this." It's telling me what you did before wasn't good enough, and now you need to do this to be better. And sometimes you have choice in that, and sometimes you don't. And so it's this very personal process. It's not just, "Oh yeah, okay, I'll do this now," or "I'll teach phonics this way now," or "I believe in this kind of reading program now," or "I believe in this philosophy or this author." It's where I am in the classroom or where I am in my career is situation after situation after situation of things that have happened and occurred for me. And so it really is, I see that happen on Twitter a lot, where someone will say something and people they feel so passionately one way or the other. And on the one hand, we really want that. I want teachers that are passionate about things, but then on the other hand, I've kind of learned too that, no one is going to be satisfied with any given thing. So I totally know what you mean. And I'm in a district position now, and I try to be very, very cognizant of the things that I tweet, because sometimes just if you retweet something, it doesn't necessarily mean that I agree with everything in there. It might mean, hey, this is something that I'm playing with, or that I'm
trying to get a conversation going about a topic.
Right. And sometimes I don't know, it's tough. But I know what you mean. I feel you on that one.
Definitely hope to start to turn things around, because I really do feel bad about how that all went out, because it definitely came across like I was bashing him behind his back, which I totally wasn't meaning to do. So I hope I can get him on the podcast and we can share some stories, and I hope to get in his classroom a little more and build that relationship back up. But that was definitely a moment for this week that it's one of those stories that I hope I can look back on as a good launching point into something else. But enough about me and my woes. we have a great guest tonight who's a good friend of mine, and it's been too long since I've had a conversation with him, so I'm so excited for him to be on the podcast. Welcome, Kylie.
Thanks, Josh. I'm super excited to be on your podcast. Like, this is it's actually my first time on a podcast, so I'm kind of nervous. I'm pretty excited, but going back to your story too, and coming from a coaching position, I see as teachers, we all take everything so personally. And I've never heard a teacher wake up in the morning and say, you know what, I'm just going to take today off. I'm not really going to teach these kids. We know how valuable our job is and how we do mold these kids. So sorry. But for us to look back at a lesson or an event in time and think that we failed these kids, it's a major step in our careers to understand that sometimes those days are going to happen, and sometimes we need to reflect and change or improve what we're doing, or just change our mindset and continue to grow. So yeah, I 100% understand that conversation. It's happened a lot in my career. So
yeah, well, I hope it at least like this doesn't happen again. I not want to shy away from tough conversations, but definitely don't want to kick them off that way. But we're very excited to have you. You are from, now I should know better than this. I know you're from Canada. I'm going to say Ontario, but I'm not sure.
Not even close. I live in a city in Alberta called Red Deer, and it's kind of right in the middle of Alberta, which is, I don't know, I'm probably 4 hours north.
Saskatchewan, then Alberta, then Vancouver, or no, British Columbia, right?
Close enough, yeah, you got it.
Yay! All right, cool. And what do you do these days, Kylie?
I have a coordinator position for our dual credit and career pathways. So I'm working with students, and technically my job is to help give students college opportunities in high school. So they're earning college level courses and high school credits at the same time.
Love it. As a former business ed teacher, those things were awesome to get kids to come into our classes because, they get college credit by taking us, and that helped us kind of balance out the AP thing that we lose kids to. So that's super cool that you're involved with that, and excited to dive into that and dive into some of your previous experience as we get into storytelling. To begin, to kick us off, get us warmed up, we of course have our personalized PD Game of Stories card, the Game of Stories by the Bretzman Group here that we do every episode. Make sure you pick up a deck of these, a lot of great prompts. We're going to do this prompt tonight. Create student videos. Tell a story about how students created videos for your class. Did they act out a scene from your content, use an avatar, or edit it like a Hollywood producer? Or what tools did students use to make it awesome? All right, so we're going to get 1 minute on the clock here.
Well, my story is I used to teach film production in my class. So we actually had a competition last year, and it's like a regional and then like a provincial competition. And I had some really talented kids, and we've been working together for about 4 years now, and they were building themselves up for this. And, they're going through the places like third place, second place, and they weren't runners up. So I was like, yeah, it's like these kids finally won. Like they thought they were so close the year before, and their name wasn't mentioned. So they didn't even place in the top 3. And watching those kids, because I was watching them, because I thought for sure they were going to win. And just that moment where that everything we worked for was gone. And I really watched those kids for the next couple of weeks, and seeing how, they went into that slump, but they still came back and built themselves up. And watching that happen, I think, was even better than watching a victory at the award ceremony. So that was, my student video story.
Wow, that's not to touch on it too long, give Mandy a shot here, but that's such a hard thing to teach without the opportunity to teach it, right? Like that opportunity where you've got to really bring yourself off the mat. And it's a hard thing to authentically prescribe because you don't want kids to ever experience that. And that's great that they were able to overcome that. I'm sure because of some excellent leadership by some teaching staff over there. And that's great that turned around, but wow, bummer though. All right, Mandy.
Bummer, yeah, total
All right. Well, I'm actually going to talk about something, not something I did, but with my own kids. I am fascinated with the amount of video prowess that my 14 and 11-year-olds that they have, just the things they can just pull together. And I'll look and I'm like, how did you do that? How did you do that? And they're like, I just made it on iMovie, or I used this and I imported this part from scratch and then I did this. And I'm like, how did you learn that? It's like, well, I mean, I did this part and I just kept clicking until it made sense. And then I Googled this part to find out how to do this. And then there was a YouTube video that showed me this. And a lot of these are just for things they're just doing for fun, not even for class. And I just continue to be struck by the things that they can teach themselves. And I think that if a lot of us would kind of turn the reins over to kids, we would be really impressed with the things that they can create. Because they know how, they can do it.
All right, excellent. I don't know if I mentioned this on a previous one, but one of my favorite experiences from last year was this Amazing Race project that we did with social studies in 7th grade. And one of the very first challenges they had to do is they had to do research on the geography of ancient Egypt. But then they had to turn around within the block, so they had an hour and 20 minutes. They had to do research on the geography and then turn around and be able to complete a 1-minute green screen video presentation for that. And it was really amazing to see how hyper-focused they were. And it just always blows me away how perfect they want to be in front of a video, and them being a bit of a YouTube generation. But the creativity that went out was pretty cool in that short amount of time. Some groups really went above and beyond. My favorites, though, was they watched a lot of CNN 10 and so many Carla Zeus impersonations and the puns. It was wonderful.
Oh, well-placed pun. Oh, gosh.
Nothing better than a great pun. Nothing.
That's the best part about having teenagers. I will tell you that right now, that the very best part about having teenagers is the smart conversations.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why I love middle school. So, Kylie, you were high school, though, weren't you?
Yeah, I taught high school almost my whole career.
Excellent. I had a little bit of high school experience, student taught in high school mostly, and then I got to teach a semester of high school classes. And definitely a different clientele from middle school by far. And you got to do some pretty awesome things with them. One thing that really stood out to me from your Google Teacher Academy video that I remember was this outdoor, what do you call it, outdoor leadership class that you had.
Yeah, it was like outdoor leadership or outdoor ed.
Okay, and that sounds great because, I mean, first of all, I know how often I got bugged in the classroom to go do class outside for the day. So I know kids love being outdoors, but it sounds like this was focused on doing, actually you were learning things outdoors. You want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so actually in our curriculum, there's an outdoor, it's called Wilderness, and there's probably about 35 courses that students can work throughout high school. So our education system has that built in, which is totally awesome. And lots of schools use it. And it was actually my first year teaching. One of the teachers had this club and was doing all of this outdoor leadership, and it had kind of been passed down from teacher to teacher. And the first year they said, "Hey, are you interested in doing this?" And we're about 2 hours from the mountains where I live. And there was this great, it's called Crown Land. So it's a government-owned land, but it's not a park. It's not a national park or provincial park. It's just no one owns it. And you can basically just go and do whatever you want, hike or camp, and there's no real restrictions or regulations. So she always took these kids on these trips, and she said, "Do you want to go?" And I said, "Absolutely." And on my second year, so I'd only been teaching for a year, we had planned this big trip, and we had about 30 kids with us this time. And this is big. That's a big number for that type of trip. And as we're driving out there, I know you don't know a lot about Alberta, but you can go through seasons so fast. And as we're driving, we're going higher in elevation, and we're basically driving through the clouds at this point. It's just like a rain day. It's just fog all around us. We can't see anything. And we we're literally going to go up over a mountain and then back down the other side and camp and then kind of hike out through the backside. And we started hiking, and we realized at this point that there was 4 teachers and 30 kids, and this is just too big of a group to be doing this. So we ended up splitting up. We were all going to meet at the same place, but we basically took like the faster kids, and we were going to go set up camp because we started hiking at about 12 o'clock that day. And at 6 o'clock, we weren't up over the mountain yet. So we were now getting a little scared about, well, we're going to get down. It's going to be dark by the lake, and we're not going to have eaten supper. And then we were radioing back and forth between the groups. And at one point I just said, oh yeah, I'm just going to double check. Like, I have my 13 kids. Like, she's like, yeah, I have 13 too as well. And I'm like, no, you have 14. And she's like, no, about an hour and a half ago, Matt said he was going to run up and catch up with your group. And I'm like, I have not seen Matt at all.
No.
Oh no. So now it's just like, what do you do? And literally we were just at the top of the mountain, and I'm like, I can't see, like 20 feet in front of me. So I'm just like, oh no. And I just started, my group stayed with their teacher, and I just started running back up the mountain or down the mountain. And yeah, Matt was there like about 100 feet behind us. And he was just walking. He's like, no, I was good. Like, this isn't a big deal, but my heart's going. And it was pretty stressful. And we, when my group got back together, we just reevaluated the situation, and it was like foggy but raining, and everyone's wet, and the temperature dropped, so it was probably like 35 degrees outside. Oh, nothing's going right. And it's 9 o'clock now. We had supper halfway up the mountain, and we just decided to pull chute and go back down the mountain, and we're going to go sleep in the buses that night, because I don't want kids to sleep out when it's almost freezing out and they're wet and can't really have a good fire. So we're hiking back down the mountain at this point, and it's 9:30 at night, and so all 30 of us are together. So it's a big group, and I'm okay. But my dad's a hunter. I'm not a hunter, but my dad's a hunter. And I remember the whole way down, we're walking down, and I can just see this picture of this 14-year-old kid, and she shot a mountain lion, and she's like, so it's a hunting magazine, and so she's standing over top of it, and I know that from like that spot there's Lake Abraham behind her, and I'm like, that's where we go hiking all the time. So now I have these 30 kids, and we're walking down this trail, and I'm like, where's this mountain lion? And I put myself in the back. I don't have kids at this point. I'm married, but I don't have kids, so I'm like, and I have my buck knife, and I have it out, because I'm like, this is all I can see in my head is this mountain lion taking the last person out. My wife is not a hunter. She hates taxidermy. And I have worked into our marriage agreement that if I kill like a bear or something with my bare hands, I get to stuff it or make a rug or something. So I'm thinking in the back of my head, I'm like, this is it. Like, I'm going to get this mountain lion. I'm going to be able to stuff it, and I can have like a taxidermy in my house. But I think looking back, if I was able to like stuff this mountain lion, I would put it up in my classroom, because then anytime a kid like talked back to me, I could just be like, dude, seriously? Like, I did that with my bare hands.
Totally.
So, I didn't have a contract yet at the time, like a continuing contract. And again, like this was in 2010, so all the kids were on Facebook, and it was there was no internet out or data or cell service out there, but the kids were on Facebook faster than I could reach my principal. And that was like the scariest thing for me too, is like, I'm not going to get a job after this year. Like, I might get fired before I even get back to school. But things worked out.
Things worked out. So I don't know you very well, Kylie, but I've taught elementary the majority of the time in first grade. So I'm used to counting my children. Like, that's what we do. I mean, to go to, we're coming back from the cafeteria. I'm like, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, okay, 22, let's go. Coming in and out from recess, making sure no child left behind in the, bathroom on the way outside. So the thought of taking children onto a mountain is number one. Like, no, thank you. Number 2, I'm from Texas. So you're like, oh yeah, we're just hiking in the mountains. It's like 30. I'm like, no, I'm out. And then I wrote down some of my favorite quotes from your thing. My wife, she hates taxidermy. I'm like, what is happening here? And I love our marriage agreement. That's my favorite. That's my best line from what you said. Like, have this, our marriage agreement. Is this like your norms for your marriage? Like, these are things that the fact that taxidermy is included in that is just fascinating to me.
Yeah, we did not get that granular. She has a hyphenated last name, and that's about it. All the more we went into it.
Some of the people out here probably should have it like written in a marriage agreement. Ours is more of a verbal contract at this point, but
that is awesome.
One thing that you said though that is fascinating is like my education experience has been in elementary, but my son just finished middle school and he's now a high school freshman. And one of the things that's fascinating to me is how different each of those levels are with parents. You know what I mean? Like, with my elementary kids, it was like I always knew everything. The teachers communicated everything. I knew when there was going to be this, or if there was a fire drill that day, they let us know. And then it's just so funny. It's like the day they go to middle school, it's like goodbye. And actually, their schools have done a really good job of kind of communicating. But I'll ask my son something and he's like, I don't know, and it's just so funny. I'm like, the thought of sending my children into the mountains, it's just awesome though. Cause like my son already, like he's going on a band trip this spring. They're going out of state on a bus and I'm like, bye. I mean, I'm just trusting these people that are going to take him into other states. So from the parent perspective, that is a lot of faith that they're putting in you.
Absolutely.
And it's amazing, like you said, like some parents would come in and they'd come to the meetings, but there's parents I never met, and I'm just like, I have their kid in the mountains.
Yeah. That's it.
Oh,
I
man.
think I'm reading a book right now. It's called The Power of Moments, and so I'm reflecting a lot on my teaching experience, and on these trips, I had a lot of kids that I had never taught, like in a traditional classroom. It was just taking them out here. And when it started, it was kind of like, yeah, I get to go hang out in the mountains with some kids for a couple of nights. Like, it was just like a fun thing I got to do. And then on my last year teaching at that school, the valedictorian had been on a bunch of trips with me, and the kids got pretty advanced. So we were doing some outdoors, like no tents. We were sleeping in hammocks out underneath the stars. And, but he ended his valedictorian speech about the trips and about how that was his moments in high school. And I didn't realize before that it had that much of an effect on the students. And he made fun of me about how, like, it was this guy in the suit, or he said I wore capri pants. But he's like, yeah, this is the guy who taught how to like fish, or like how to make a fire outside. And he's like, he was talking about not judging a book by its cover. But that was one of the most moving moments in my education career, was his valedictorian speech. So
wow, that is something else and I think that is one of those things that as a middle school teacher, and I'm sure Mandy as an elementary school teacher, I mean, there is such a long time between when those kids come through you and then end up out, that, I mean, you really do feel like, I hope they learned a couple things and they have a good life. Like, and to think that, you had an impact is one of those things you just hope that they remember the things that you did. So that's super cool to get a shout out in a valedictorian speech. I think that's, I think most teachers probably could, but it's very cool to hear them mentioned by name. I'm sure that anybody would never forget that moment. So speaking of outdoors, have you spent much time in the States?
Yeah, we're not too far from the border. We went down to Montana this summer, but I've been to a couple conferences out there. I met you in San Francisco, so we try to get down there, once a year at least.
Interesting. Any memorable experiences from your time in the U.S.? I've been to Canada once. It was this summer, and it was not memorable at all. We got out of the airport and took a shuttle to the hotel and woke up and took a shuttle back to the airport. It was super exciting. Hopefully you have something better than that.
Yeah, there's always something, right? It's the little things that you notice that are like the big differences between our like societies. But probably my most favorite memory was with you, Josh, in Philadelphia. And I don't know if you remember ISTE at all. And I don't know if you remember this night very well either.
It was the first ISTE was a whirlwind.
Power of moments.
I had never been to a conference that gigantic before. I had never been to Philly and like dropped in a big city by myself before. Like I normally I have my wife with me, and she's much more, at least at the time, was much more traveled than me. So having her was always good because I knew she knew like stuff. Like she was a little more street smart than me from little 7,000 town Rhinelander, Wisconsin. So yeah, I don't remember a lot because there was just so much. I mean, that was right after the first time I really got to meet a lot of people from Twitter. So just like, bam, oh, you, and you're you, and you're you. So I got to be honest, I don't remember a lot other than it was in Philadelphia. So you may continue.
I hope you do. I hope you do.
That was my one and only time at ISTE, actually. And I did, not knowing anything, probably one of the best things I did was I wanted to do all the Philly stuff. So the first morning I was there, it rained a lot before, but I got up and went for a run, and I had to go run the Rocky Steps, of course, right? So, and I'm happy I did that morning one, not knowing that every other morning was going to be harder and harder to wake up, just because the days are so long, the nights are even longer. There's so many people out there. You know, you're trying to get up for like coffee queue, but like there's just so much happening, right? But my story was after the big teacher soiree. I don't even know what the
it was the Gaggle event that everybody goes to, right? I'm assuming it was that one.
It was. There was probably like 10,000 people in the streets. There's
yeah. That was crazy to see that.
But you and I and David Saunders were walking back to our hotels, and I don't know, maybe 3 a.m. And that's when as we were leaving the party, we were like walking away, and there's less and less people out in the street. And at one point you're like, man, thank goodness Kylie is walking with us, because I would be really scared right now if he wasn't here. And the panic that overcame me, because I was like, oh no, if I'm the guy you're happy we're with, we are in a lot of trouble. And now, should I be scared? Like, is there something I don't know about Philadelphia? Like, I just assumed everyone played basketball out in the playgrounds. But so like to that day, like to this day, I was like scared after that moment. I was good before that. But.
That is hilarious. Yeah, I tell you, late at night in a big city, and I had to walk a mile to my hotel in the dark. And I hadn't really used Uber much before, and I think my battery was probably close to dead, so that'd have been iffy. And I'm all of 5'9.5", and I was probably like 170 pounds. Like, just late at night, I feel like a bit of an easy target. So Kylie, Mr. Outdoor Guy, and David was there too for a little bit on the walk back. Or maybe it was, I don't know, it could have been Doug Robertson was there too somewhere along the way. So it was a very cool social experience, but that's hilarious because I don't even remember saying that, but that sounds like something I would say. So I don't doubt the authenticity of that story at all. So that's...
And it's just...
Yeah, those experiences are so neat. And, it's hard to like recreate the magic of that. Like that first year was so awesome because I was meeting everybody for the first time and I was super involved in Twitter. So it was like, I kind of knew what to talk about with people. And, recently I've become a lot more focused just on where I'm at in my school and really wanted to dedicate my time and energy to that. And thus I've gone away from Twitter and I don't really use it as much. I don't chat as much. So, I go back and like, yeah, there's still people, but it's so spread out. And it just didn't feel the same. Like it was so cool, like meeting everybody for the first time and really hanging out. And then just every subsequent time has really, like it hasn't been quite the same. So Philly was a cool experience, and I'm glad that you brought that story because that reminded me of how cool and how amazing that first time was there. All right. Well, any last little, quick stories you feel like you need to share?
There's one that I probably actually should have talked about because it's more about education. But I was at a conference in Lubbock, Texas once, and
There you go.
Mandy's from Texas.
Now you're in my state.
Right. And well, I don't know. Texas always makes me want to stay a couple extra nights. And I had my own conference that I was running on the Friday. I was supposed to fly out Thursday, and we just got reined in. Like we couldn't fly out of Lubbock. We couldn't get anywhere. And I ended up taking a road trip from Lubbock to Dallas, which is about 6 hours. Mm-hmm. And it was Casey Bell actually who just said, like, I'm renting a car and I'm driving to Dallas. So there's a couple of us that went in this car and just went for 6 hours. And that was the best professional development I think I've ever had in my life. Just being locked in this car with these like brains. Sandra Chow was the other person in the car, and just throwing ideas. Oh, and it was every time I can now get just locked in a car for a couple hours with someone, I'm like, yes, let's do it. And don't turn on the radio, and you just throw these ideas at each other. And, well, what if you did this? And that was probably like my favorite moment. I missed my conference, and my boss was really mad at me the next day. But that moment in the car was something special for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think that I'm from a town just outside of Austin, and it's pretty small. And so these big conferences are kind of elusive to me. But I've been able to make a few connections with people that I follow on Twitter in real life. And I was actually in North Texas at a conference, and got to meet up with Mandy and Trevor Reagan. And it was kind of similar. We just met for dinner, and we ended up just talking and talking and talking and talking. And then it's been so fascinating, like watching, we were all three presenting at this, the NetX conference up in North Texas. But it's just amazing how, like, she's like, yeah, I'm at the restaurant, and I walked in, and I'm like, I've never met you before. And I'm just walking in, and we're like, hey, we're talking about school, and we're talking about kids, and we're talking about pedagogy. And it just the whole idea that you can start these actual connections and relationships. My mom is always like, is that safe? And, because I'll be like, oh yeah, my Twitter friend or whatever. And it's just so fascinating to me that that is something you can do. But like, even with the Bretzman group, being able to participate in things like patio PD and just that idea of personalized PD, that, we have a lot of PD done to us. But when educators are just together having their own conversations is very often when I learn the very most. And like you said, it's like car PD. That's not automobile. I don't know. That doesn't flow the way patio PD does, but or fireside or poolside or
road trip PD is what it should be called.
Yes, we need more road trip PD for sure.
But even just thinking about hopping in a car with people and heading out, and I know they did that a couple of years ago, I think with an ISTE road trip maybe or something like that. But it's a great idea. It's a way to really get some good minds in a car and talking about what we do. And I think it's powerful.
Absolutely. Well, Kylie, this has been an excellent discussion. Love the stories that were going on tonight. And I think you added a little something different that we haven't heard before, which is great. And, 30 some episodes of this now. And it's just still amazing just to sit back and listen. I mean, I can do this forever. So thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to see you. It's like you said, it's been way too long.
Where can people hear more about what you're doing and maybe learn, if they have questions about the dual credit stuff, which is, a pretty big deal here in a lot of our high schools. Where can they learn more about what you do?
Definitely give me a follow on Twitter and reach out that way. It's just at Kylie Kissel, Kylie Kissel. And yeah, definitely reach out and connect. I would love to talk about anything education. So.
All right. Well, Kylie, it has been
I also
awesome.
like being
yeah, and we need to find a way to get the old gang back together via Google Hangout or something, and make it happen. Share some stories and get some ideas flowing, because it was such a great group of dynamic people who are all doing great stuff now. So have a great night and a wonderful week.
You guys too. Thanks again. Bye, Mandy. Bye, Josh.
Bye.
All right. So really enjoyed talking with Kylie. Obviously, he and I know each other. Surprise. But that outdoor education thing seems so cool. And I think there's so many more stories that we could probably pull from that. He could probably write a book about it, I'm sure.
Right. Well, and I like the idea that he said it's built into their curriculum. That's something that I think, I know that like my daughter and my son both have had experiences like when they're in 5th grade in our district or at our school, the kids would go to an outdoor learning center. So it's basically like an overnight camp. I think they stayed for maybe 2 nights, maybe 3, but it was like a little camp, and they slept in cabins, and they had, sponsors, and the teachers were all in, but the kids, it was such a team building thing. I mean, they did all kinds of things, and they just said that they really got to know the kids in a different way because it was very academic in nature, but it was still not academically centered, I guess. So they said that kids just got to show these talents that they were able to utilize those connections, throughout the rest of the school year. And so, I mean, I wrote down that book that he was talking about, something about the power of moments. And I really think that's what things like that are, when we've been able to take my kids, like, to New York, or we've been able to take them, on trips and stuff like that, they remember those things, those moments, those little things, and it builds those shared jokes and those, I think that is such a huge part of just growing into your own skin as an adult, is those things that have happened. So I'm really fascinated by that process. Totally.
And I totally can mirror that. Anything that I've had an opportunity to do with students that happens outside of the school, they are outside the context of the academic classroom. You get to know them way better, and some really cool things can happen. So that was good to highlight that with him tonight. Thank you for listening once again to the Stories in EDU podcast. We'll be here every Tuesday, and we're excited to have new episodes churning along this year as we have our season 2 going on. So please keep listening, subscribe on iTunes, and check us out on YouTube. Wherever you want to consume media is where we will be. And if you would like to jump on the podcast, feel free to reach out to Mandy or myself. We'd be happy to chat and share some stories with you on air. So thank you. Have a great week and rest of your day wherever you are, and we will catch you on the next episode.
Thank you for tuning in to the Stories in EDU podcast. Please be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Until next time, thanks again.